So all this amazing meat from one amazing animal, and the animal lived as perfect as an existence as is possible. She had free range of 1.5 acres of woodland, give or take. She was housed, fed, watered every day and looked after, and this is what we get out of it at the end. So we've just come out to collect some bins from Wincanton Fruit and Veg. Claudia, who runs it, gives us all of their leftover produce that isn't going to sell because it's, you know, gone over. And my wife, the superstar, is here with me today instead of Jason. Jason's he's just done so much for us lately, I didn't feel like I could even ask him. We're going to have a look around here? Just going to put my mask on, we're going to have a quick look around the shop. So this is the bottom end, it's all whole foods, organic themed and zero waste. A sort of combination. And then up the back end there is the fruit and vegetable shop. Okay, so next stop is home, and when we get home, I've spent the last 2 days butchering a pig. Now, I've shot an awful lot of footage, probably about 12 hours of footage, and it's going to take me a long time to edit that all down. What I'm aiming to do, let me just get in the car. So what I'm aiming to do with that footage is I'm going to release a version for the regular YouTube channel. So if you're partially interested in that, that you're not going to miss that. That is coming on the YouTube channel. And for those of you who are vegans or whatever and don't want to see it, or for whatever reason don't want to see it, that's fine, that's great. I'm not going to publish in a short version for the YouTube channel. I'm not going to publish any of the more graphic stuff on that. But what I am going to do, I'm going to do a separate video, and I'm going to show as much as I can of the whole process. And what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to release that as basically a private video on YouTube that you can only access through a link, and then I'm going to post that link on our Facebook group. So that's how you can access it. So everyone can access it, but I'm going to make it available to patrons first and then the wider public versus Facebook. But if you don't want to see that, you don't have to worry about it just showing up in your feed. That's not going to happen. You're not going to have it pushed on you, not by me. So that's coming. So if you want to see all that, all you've got to do is just keep following, and I'll let you know when that link is up. It's going to take me a few, maybe days even, because it's, like I said, there's so much footage to edit. But the reason I'm saying all that is to say I've got a fridge full of pork now. And one of the things that I'm hoping to do today is when I get home, I've got a big section of trimmings that are going to be made into sausage meat. So I want to do that today with you. And the other thing I want to do is I've got some ham joints that I want to start curing and turning into ham. So I want to do both of those things with you today. If there's time, we'll have to see. I've got so much else that I want to share with you coming up. Some of my Christmas presents, I've got a new polytunnel. We're going to be putting that up in the coming days. So yeah, stay tuned. In the meantime, let's head home and get these bins out and then start processing that pork. So we're back. We've dropped the bins off at the pigs, and 3 pigs now, obviously. So we've got plenty of feed to go through the winter. This cycle is about right. I mentioned back along that we were actually struggling to keep up with pig feed because we had an extra pig that I hadn't budgeted for, because the pig that I've recently harvested, was due to be harvested a couple of months ago. A combination of that and my lack of mobility and ability to go and collect these bins on my own meant that we were struggling for pig food, and I actually went and had to buy some commercial feed for the first time this year, or for the first time in the last 6 or 9 months anyway, and that now is something we don't need to worry about. We've got the right balance, right amount of animal to feed supply. One of the other things that we collect when we're out collecting our pig waste is these coffee grounds. I've got 3 of these, not all from this trip. These are for composting. They're a great way of increasing the amount of organic matter that you've got to compost. So we can never have too much compost, so we're collecting this just to increase that amount of organic matter. And God, everything's so wet, the ground's so wet, and we're just going to start a new compost pile now, or sort of extend it. So here's the compost that we've taken already, was here, and then this is compost that is almost ready. And then we're just starting a new pile up here. You see we've already got some ash from the fire there. Now we're not very, what's the word? We're not very meticulous with how we layer our compost or anything like that. We create so much of it that we are afforded that freedom, if you like. If you're creating a big enough pile, you can be a little bit less precise with how you are composing your piles. So having said that, that's a big bin full of ash. I'm going to spread that out a little bit now before I introduce the coffee grinds. And then over the coming months, obviously we'll be adding lots and lots of green matter to it. 3 of these to empty out, and then we're going to be in the kitchen. Okay, so we're going to start processing all of our pork now. Due to a combination of time restrictions and budgetary restrictions, we are having to use some single-use plastic. Well, I say single-use, we'll probably use them more than once, but we've got some zip seal food bags. I've also got these boxes, which aren't single-use, obviously. These we're going to be using for curing. So we're going to be using these to cure our hams. Down here, we've got a fridge that is literally jam-packed with pork, right from the front, right to the back. There's only room in there for a few bottles of kombucha down the side, and that's it. And we've got some more pork over in the other fridge as well. Not quite as much. We've got, I think, a big ham and 2 or 3 other cuts. I've spent 2 days basically processing, and now what we've got is our joints. There's no more jointing needs doing. But what we're going to do now is just wrap them properly, label them, get them in the freezer. Then as we come across them, we're also going to be making sausage meat from the trimmings that we've set aside for that purpose. And we're going to start curing probably some bacon and some ham. And the idea will be that once that's cured, that can either go back in the fridge for consumption or it can go in the freezer for use at a later date. But all the sort of work, if you like, will have been done. I'm also going to save a ham, a big ham, that I'm going to attempt to make into prosciutto ham. So, you know, those really expensive Parma style hams that you see, we're going to try and make one of those. Now, I've ordered some curing salts online, which will arrive the next couple of days. So by the time they get here, that meat will have been in the fridge for maybe 4 days, which is obviously absolutely fine. As you know, when you buy pork from the supermarket or a shop or wherever, it's got a really long shelf life. It's going to be fine for over a week in the fridge. So that's my plan with that. So that's the only piece that will still have some processing still to do after today. So I've just wiped down, disinfected all my surfaces, clean my hands obviously. Just a quick word on regulations. It's going to vary dramatically based on where you live. But I can speak to the regulations here in the UK, and they're really fairly simple once you understand them. If you are producing food for your own family's consumption, then the rules are relatively straightforward. You can do pretty much anything you like. If you're going to sell to outside consumers, and that includes your next door neighbours, then it's a completely different ball game. If you're producing meat for sale or to enter into the food chain, there's so many things you can't do that I have done. Firstly, you can't feed them things like table scraps. There's quite strict regulations on what you can and can't feed animals that are destined to enter the food chain. So you need to bear that in mind. Secondly, you need to have them butchered by a regulated butcher. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If you're going to have them butchered by a regulated butcher, that butcher is not able to do it unless they've been slaughtered by a regulated slaughter person. So effectively, I wasn't able to, for instance, slaughter my pig and then have another butchery handle it. Even if it was for personal consumption, they wouldn't do it. They weren't allowed. So by bringing everything in-house, all the sort of cards fell for me like dominoes, one after the other, and I was able to do everything. So because I was doing the consumption here in our house, I was then able to butcher. Because I was butchering, I was able to slaughter. And because we were consuming in our house, we were able to determine what scraps and other produce we were allowed to feed our pigs. We wouldn't even be allowed to feed our pigs the waste products from the fruit and vegetable shops that you've just seen me collecting if the plan was for that meat to enter the food chain. So bear that in mind. And these regulations are going to vary depending on where you live in the world. I can't speak to the regulations elsewhere, but those are the regulations here in the UK. So now I'm going to start getting our meat out and start just bagging it up, ready for the freezer. My son is at the door, worried if he can enter the kitchen. Camera's pointing this way, son. Crack on. Right, so the main idea is moving all this from just massive pieces of pork in the fridge to getting it labelled and in the freezer. So we're going to start, we're just going to come across it as it comes. We're going to start with this, just some simple, I've got 4 pork medallions in there. So I'm just going to label them and then move on to the next thing. And then when we've done them all, we'll be able to put them in the freezer and know what we're getting out when we come to get them out. And this is just a small pork roasting joint. Now, obviously, you know, you'll see this if and when you watch the actual butchering video. I kind of lost track of what was what by the time I got it into the fridge, for some of it, not all of it. So, you know, this joint here will have a specific name. It'll be a certain part of the animal, but in a lot of cases, I've just lost track. But that's okay, you know. I think one of the things is that due to the way I did it, basically you know, I watched lots of tutorial videos of how to do it, and you know, they get to a point where you've got this animal in front of you, all in certain sections, and you know, it's really clear what's what. Well, I got to a point and nothing looked like I was expecting it to, so I had to just redesign. So I'm going to be labeling these, not necessarily what they are, but what I'm going to do with them. So this will be a slow roast belly type joint, and I'm just going to call it a slow roast joint, and that's how we'll label it. The idea of the labeling for me isn't that it's all labeled correctly. That's not the goal. The goal is to not waste the meat and to know what I'm pulling out of the freezer, what I should do with it. So these in here, I think, yeah, these are my pork loins, or some of them. Okay, there's another nice big pork joint. So these would be effectively 2 different cuts. These are the whole ribs. So effectively you've got a pork chop there, and then what would be your ribs at that end. But when you come to watch the video again, it will become clear. My reciprocating saw didn't play along, and the plan was obviously to cut the ribs straight down the middle, which is what you'd normally do, or what you'd do in an ideal world. But that wasn't possible for me. So it just means we're going to be having these served as giant pork chops, so I'm okay with that. Like I say, none of this, I'm not a professional butcher, I'm not showing you how to do it. Jesus, please don't think I'm doing that. What I'm doing is showing you what I've done and what I've learned. And you know, next time obviously I will process the carcass slightly differently with a saw so that I can separate those out. So again, the labelling is not about making sure that I've got it labelled correctly insofar as what the joints are actually called. It's about me knowing how to use them. So whatever piece I take out of the freezer, I know that I've got a plan for it. Or if I'm going in there for something specific, I can find a cut that I can use for that purpose. So I'm going to call these pork chops because that's how we're going to use them. And you know, just because they're not labelled in the same way as they would be in the supermarket, they're not going to be, you know, any less delicious. They're going to be more so. So you know, I'm not complaining. Got my sons squirreling around the kitchen, crawling to access the bottom of the island here that I'm on. Desperately trying to stay out of shot because I'm doing this in a, you know, a household, a family house that's being used. I'm in the kitchen. It's not only me who uses the kitchen. So there we go, big bag of pork chops. Okay, and I don't need to open this one. This one I can see is a amazing long pork loin. So we'll just label that one straight up. That is a mini pork joint just for roasting. And here we've got some more pork medallions. So this is basically be the top of a chop. without the bone. We've got several of them, so I'm going to separate these into 2 bags with 4 or 5 in each. Again, the purpose of all this isn't to identify it on the, as the correct cut. It's so that I know what I'm getting out of the freezer and what I'm going to do with it. Obviously, in time, I will become more proficient at the actual butchering itself, and the cuts will become clearer to me what they are. I won't make as many rudimentary errors in the, the setup and the beginning part of the butchery, which leads to confusion and misidentification and the inability basically to create the cuts that you want later, which is what I've suffered from this time. But it's all a learning curve. First time I've ever done it, obviously. And here's another one of the pork loins. So we've got all sorts in here. So I'm going to label these 2 as mini pork joints. These will probably do a family meal between the 2 of them. So I'll put them in there. And the learning will continue throughout the cooking process and eating process as well. I'll learn what bits I should have spent a bit more time worrying about the identification of and what bits I shouldn't. I'm going to separate out some of these here and call them pork steaks, because that's how I can cook and serve them. So that's going to be enough for a really large meal for me and my wife. So let's call that pork steaks. I've got an audience now of giggling observers. What's the joke?
Fiona wants lunch, and I was just explaining.
Share it with the class.
Fiona wants lunch, and I was explaining how you've strategically cornered off the parts that she needs to have lunch.
Everyone else had soup today.
I didn't.
Don't have any of the ham or the turkey, because I'm making a tagliatelle with it later.
I didn't actually.
Didn't you? Tagliatelle for dinner, yeah? And then finally we've got a small pork loin. A little tip, what I do with pork loins almost always is I butterfly them out that way, again and again and again, and create a big square, and then I might place something like, some kind of salami, cured sausage, asparagus in the middle, sometimes grapes works really well, and then roll it up. Wrap it in prosciutto or some other kind of cured ham and make a joint, and basically you make this 3 or 4 times the size, and it tastes amazing. I will do that at some point this year. I will definitely do that with some of these loins that I've made myself, and I'll share it with you. I'll share the recipe and the process of cooking. But we're going to call this a small loin. I probably wouldn't manage it with this one because it is a bit small, but I've got plenty of loins to do it with. Right, next up I've got 2 decent sized shoulder joints. Look at this. See if the bigger one is going to fit in one of these bags. Trying to hold as much air out of the bag as I can to save freezer space and to preserve the meat that little bit better.
So he's doing cute together.
What's she doing?
He's made a little mess.
And a little steak. So I know this will be from the shoulder, so we'll label that appropriately, pork shoulder steak. Where's he making it?
Under the slope, look.
I'm just getting a report from the front room. My son's tortoise Timmy is making a little nest. You sure it's not to hide them?
Yes.
What's he make it out of?
Just a bit of towel.
Aww,
His little chin rested on.
that's cute. So this, I think, is just some diced pork, lean diced pork. Let me have a look. No, I'm wrong. Glad I checked. So it's just some lean cuts. So I might just label it as lean pork. We might use this in a stew, or we might use it to make pork for slicing, for sandwiches. And what's in here? So in here we've got some hams that I'm actually going to turn into ham. So I'll put these to one side. We'll do these just before the sausage meat. That'll be the last things we do. Okay, and here we have our belly pork that we're going to turn into streaky bacon. I'll leave all these till last and make a decision in a minute, because I'm not going to be able to process everything that I want to process today. I don't have enough cure, but we'll see how we get on. Oh, and here we just have some pork ribs, which I'm going to label as such, and then when it comes to using them, I will probably take them out of the freezer well in advance and marinate them separately. So we'll, we've got several meals worth here, and due to my inadequate butchery skills, you'll see there's masses of meat on these ribs. Now, normally on spare ribs, you probably get a third of this amount of meat. So there's two ways of looking at that. That one's about right, actually, that one's not too bad. There's two ways of looking at that. We've either missed out on some cuts of meat elsewhere, or we've got some ribs which otherwise might not have much meat on them that are going to have loads of meat on them, so they're going to make up a much more substantial part of a meal, or the main part of a meal. I mean, look at that. That's going to be amazing. So yeah, these are all our pork ribs. And again, in an ideal world, you see, what would have happened is they'd have been split straight down there, and on this end, so where I've got my pork medallions, they've come from here, and if I'd cut that in half, that would have been your pork chop, and then that would have been your baby ribs, that end, or your spare ribs, or whatever you want to call it, I think. But that's not what we've done, so we're going to bag these up and label them appropriately. If I can work out how to use these bags, perhaps they're idiot proof. I'm actually really excited about cooking these ribs. I think I'm going to be able to make something fantastic out of them. They're going to be so full of flavour. And I don't normally share too much of my cooking with you guys, but there's two things that I've got on my mind. One is that I've had a request to do a few more recipe type videos, so that's been taken on board. And the second is that because this is the home reared, home butchered, home slaughtered pig, I'm definitely going to share a lot of the final result of these as I do them. Look at the amount of meat on that. I mean, that's more chop than rib, isn't it? I'm really excited to cook with these, and if it wasn't for the fact that we've got quite a bit of leftovers still from the Christmas period, so we always do, much like growing for gluts, which is a term Alan uses a lot. Alan, who did those videos that I shared with you recently on soap making and the beeswax wraps, he uses the term growing for gluts a lot, and it's one I've really liked and sort of taken on. I grow for gluts, but I also cook for gluts. So when we cooked our Christmas dinner, even though it was a much reduced number of people around the table, and I definitely reduced the amount I cooked, I still cooked for gluts, and I cooked to have lots of leftovers. And we've got through pretty much all the veggies, all the spuds and everything else. The only thing we've got left is some turkey. And then on the day after Boxing Day, I also cook every year a big ham. And the idea is, and it's something that my kids really look forward to, they nag me for it, they look forward to it as much as our Christmas dinner, is with the leftover ham and turkey, I make a giant tagliatelle carbonara, and I'm going to be making that later. And even that will be cooking for gluts. There'll be lots of that left over. So if it wasn't for the fact that I've got a fridge full of stuff that is already needs a use, then I would definitely be leaving some of these ribs out to cook. And do you know what? I might anyway. In fact, I will. I'm going to leave one set out. Maybe this big set. Look at that meat. Because I'm just really excited to cook with it. So I think this, or one of them, we'll see, we'll leave in the fridge rather than the freezer. And I think the freezer might be glad of that as well, because it's going to be heaving in a minute. So just another small joint. It's quite fatty, and I'm going to label it that way because I find it makes a huge difference to me how I'm going to cook something as to how much fat's on it. Now, as you know, or as you will know if you watch the video, we lost a lot of the fat in the skinning. We don't have that many fatty joints, but this is one. And if it's fatty, then I'm going to cook it much, much slower, most likely. Cook it like a belly joint. And that's how I think I get the best results. Alternatively, I might choose to render some of the fat down, but I don't think I'm going to because I don't think I've got enough. Got 3 joints here to quickly wrap, and in here is just some offcuts, but chunky offcuts. So like you might buy misshaped bacon or bacon offcuts. It's a bit like that, and I'm going to label it exactly like that because, you know, that could be a steak, or it could be cut into chunks and used in a casserole, or even sliced up thinly. Or probably what I'll do with this is I will cook it up, cut it into really thin pieces, into strips, cook it up, and then make it like a Mexican style sauce, like a salsa style sauce, toss it in there, and we'll have that with pita breads, salad, mayonnaise, or with fajitas, you know, rolled up, something like that. But yeah, that's what that'll be used for. And then these other 3 are all, I think, leg joints. So these will be roasting joints. Oh, in fact, that's 2 smaller ones. Didn't expect that. Okay. Didn't expect that, like I didn't make them. So there we go. That's 1 leg joint. In fact, these last 2 I'm fairly confident are shoulders. We've got 2 leg and 2 shoulder joints there. 1, 2, yeah. So what I'm going to do next, I think, is get all these in the freezer. But before I do that, I'm just going to lay out the rest of it in front of you, just so you can see it all in one place, the volume that we're dealing with. There we go. So all this amazing meat from one amazing animal, and the animal lived as perfect as an existence as is possible. She had, you know, free range of 1.5 acres of woodland, give or take. She was housed, fed, watered every day and looked after, and this is what we get out of it at the end. So we've got all these cuts that I sort of spoke about and talked you through as we went. We're going to get them in the freezer next. We've got these pork joints, we've got leg and shoulder and some offcuts. Then what we've got is, finally, we've got 1 massive leg ham joint. So we're going to freeze this as it is, because our usual Christmas Eve dinner was kind of cancelled due to us not being able to have guests round. I think we'll save this and we'll do that as a replacement dinner. So that's that. Then this is the other leg. You notice it's quite a bit smaller. That's because we've cut these pieces off it. No, I've done that wrong. Okay, so these were off the shoulder. These are the other shoulder. So I'm glad I spotted that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bag these up as joints because I put my hams in here. So yes, these 2 we're going to ham. So I thought we were going to be hamming these. It's these 2. So we're going to turn these into ham, take them out of there, and we're going to bag these up as joints. So this is the last ham, and I'm going to attempt to prosciutto that and turn that into a Parma style ham. That won't be today, so this one is going back in the fridge. We've got 2 cuts of belly pork here, which we're going to be turning into streaky bacon. And then over here, we've got our trimmings that we're going to be making into sausage meat. So I'm going to bag up the rest of these, get them in the freezer, and then start working on the ones that we've still got to process. Okay, so that went really well. I was worried that there wasn't going to be enough room in the fridge, in the freezer rather, in our chest freezer. But it's all gone in. There's room for a few small pieces. For instance, these 2 could go in if I wanted them to. But yeah, that's great. So, as a family, we've got to make sure that we've eaten a couple of things out of there in the next week or 2, because by that time the hams and the bacons will be cured and they'll be ready to go in the freezer. So I'm going to put The sausage trimmings back in the fridge for a minute because we're not going to be dealing with them now. And the next thing we're going to do is start curing our hams and bacon. Right, so this is the simplest thing in the world. This is our belly pork, and all we're going to do is wash it under a tap and then pat it dry with a piece of kitchen roll. I haven't done that yet, I shall do that shortly. And then in here, we've got a 50-50 mix of just regular table salt and regular white sugar. The sort of sugar you put in your coffee and the sort of salt that you put on your chips. That's all we're going to use. Now, if you're going to be curing something for a longer period of time, these are quite quick cures. If you're going to be doing a prosciutto ham, which I'm going to be doing later, you need to think a little bit differently about your salt. You need to have a certain balance of nitrates and nitrites. I don't pretend to be an expert, and I'll have done my research before I start doing the prosciutto ham, and I'll talk to you about it at the time. Can't really talk to you about it now, so I don't feel that I have the authority. I don't have the knowledge. So for now, I'm going to talk to you about the ones that I'm comfortable with, that I've done before. And this is sort of about as big as you'll want to do in this process, because what we're doing is we're going to cure these, we're going to dry cure these, and we're going to dry cure them in a way that they're going to be cured quick enough in the fridge that if they were just sat in the fridge for that period of time anyway, they'd be quite happy. Now, we all know when you buy pork at the shop, it's got a rather long life on it compared to most meats, compared to a lot of things. So it's going to be quite happy in the fridge for over a week. You're not going to find pork fresher than this. 2 days ago, this was walking around in our wood. So, you know, you're not going to find anything fresher. So we're going to do a cure that I think is going to take about a week. It's difficult to tell on these larger joints, but, you know, I'm about 2 inches across there and similar across there, maybe a touch more. Anything bigger than that, you might want to think about a more specialist cure. But for what we're doing, because we're going to be expecting them to be done within a week, what we're doing is fine. So I'm going to just rinse these under the tap now and then pat them dry. And you're just going to use kitchen roll for this. And then once that's done, we're going to basically just rub in lots and lots of this cure. We're going to make sure that we cover every piece of the meat. And we're going to do it over here because these are the boxes which we're going to actually cure them in. So we want to make sure that we rub it in nice and deep into every part of the meat. And as I say, this is just salt and sugar, 50-50, that we've mixed together. We've mixed it well. So you want a nice, you know, really rub it in. Make sure you get all the edges, all the ends, everywhere that you can, really. And of course you can do this with a much smaller cut of meat, and it's just that little bit easier to handle, and it's going to work just as well. But the idea is basically the salt is going to pull out all of the moisture that's in the meat, or a significant portion of it. And by removing that moisture from the meat, then you've created an environment within which the bad bacteria can't grow. So we're going to put plenty of cure in the bottom there, about 1/2 inch. And then we're going to put that in there. To be fair, this is a bit big actually for this tub. You want to make sure that your cure is all around the meat. And don't be shy with it, be quite liberal. So there we go. That's one piece of bacon curing. Now in an ideal world, again, like I say, I'll see how much cure I've got left because I've got quite a bit I want to do with it. We would cover that completely, but I'm trying to make the most of what I've got here. So we're going to do our 2 hams next, and these fit nicely in this tub. So there we go. And we're rubbing it in all the nooks and crannies. And then we'll take about 1/2 inch in the bottom of this tub and place that on top. And then we'll do basically exactly the same with this piece of ham. And dry curing, as opposed to moisture curing, wet curing, when commercial enterprises cure ham, they tend to do it by injecting a liquid into the meat. This is a cheaper way of doing it, quicker way of doing it, but not as good, not as nice in my opinion. And that's why when you fry bacon that you buy in the shop, you get that white froth coming out of it. That's that wet cure that they've injected into the meat that causes that. So we're going to put that in there. And then I know I've not got enough cure, so what I'm going to do when I finish this video is I will go off and pick up a bit more salt and sugar so that I can basically cover everything. Yeah, because I'm not going to have enough to do both my bits of belly pork otherwise. And then finally the last bit of belly pork. And then the process from here is just really, really simple. Just every day or so, just like you would treat a sourdough, every day or so we're going to come and we're going to take off any excess moisture that's formed, because all that moisture is going to be drawn out of the meat and replace with more cure as we need to. It's just a case of taking away anything you can pour should come off, and I tend to get rid of the wetter bits of the cure, because you'll find some of the cure will have gone a bit wet in corners where some of the moisture will pool, and I would get rid of that as well. Let me see if I bring that up the other side. Yeah, this is nearly perfect, but you want that dusting over the whole thing. So once I've got enough to cover it all, then I'm going to put the lids on. You don't need lids, but I'm going to put the lids on because where else am I going to put them? And then put them in the fridge. And then, like I say, every 24 hours or so, we're just going to top up the cure, drain away the moisture as required. I'm just seeing, I've basically just hijacked the last of the table salt that we had in the cupboard. I bought some specifically for this job, but we had some in the cupboard, and I've mixed that with some sugar, again 50-50, and I'm just seeing if that might be enough that I can put these away. I'll still need more cure, I'll need it for tomorrow and the day after and the day after, but that might get us, I think it will, that'll get us through till tomorrow. So it means I've got a few other jobs that I need to do around the house when I've finished all this processing. It means I can do those first and then maybe go out and get some more salt if I've got time. But that's all you need to do there for today. And like I say, these now go back in the fridge. And by the time that their shelf life would be, coming to the point where you're thinking, okay, I need to worry about it now, they're going to be cured, they're going to be bacon or hams. And there's two things to say about that. When you buy ham, a fresh ham, that should last a very long time in the fridge as well. It still needs refrigerating, but because we've drawn all the moisture out, the environment is really going to inhibit bacteria growth. So they're going to keep for a lot longer. Don't ask me how long, because I don't have an answer for you, but I know that for our personal use, we'll be fine with them being in the fridge for another week after the week that they've been curing. But we probably won't do that. What we'll do is, because they'll still want cooking, the hams, so what we'll do is once they're cured, we will then either put them in rotation where they're going to be eaten as part of our diet that week, or they'll go in the freezer ready to come out as ham or bacon. So that's that. I'm going to get these in the fridge now, have a clear up, and then we'll start looking at sausages. Okay, so now we're going to have a go at making sausage meat. Again, something I've never done before. Now, I was amazed actually by how affordable this was. I bought this back in the spring. I saw someone using it at a client's house, or using a similar version, and they were using it with old joints of meat, leftovers. So they were doing it with lamb, and the lamb had already been cooked. I think it was a leg, and it was a way of using the leftovers. They actually minced the leftovers to then make a pie or whatever out of the minced lamb, cooked minced lamb. I thought that's a great idea for using leftovers. As it happens, we are far too efficient at using leftovers. We've never had to use it, but I knew I had it, and today we're going to have a go at making sausage meat. I have no idea how well this is going to go, but I can only do my best. Now, I'd like to tell you that I've spent hours researching how to do sausage meat, but I won't, because I haven't. I think it's a fairly simple equation. My understanding, rudimentary as it may be, is that plus that equals sausage meat. If that's not the case, I don't know what to tell you. So I'm going to give all this a quick rinse before we start. Right, there we go. So I'm going to actually just give the instructions a cursory glance, although it does look fairly straightforward to me. I used to own a t-shirt that said, "Real dads don't read instructions." And I did live by that for a very long time. Loosen the clamp and slide carefully onto the edge of the worktop or other suitably sturdy surface. This is definitely not, but we're going to use it nonetheless. I made this little island. Secure the tightening screw underneath. To use the sausage making attachment, unscrew the sourcing ring. So I didn't think I had a sausage making attachment. So that's brilliant. I had it in my head that one of the purchases I was going to have to make was a sausage maker. So that's brilliant. I'll have to buy some casings because my plan today is just to make sausage meat. We're going to use them just like if you, I think like they do in McDonald's breakfast drive-through. You've got the sausage patties. So a sausage and egg muffin is just a sausage patty, not a sausage in a skin. So that's my plan. But it's great that I can make sausages, so I'll have to buy some casements and then in the future, obviously, learn how to make my own. Well, I think we start by getting him attached to the worktop. I'm right-handed, so I think this way is going to work. Yeah, that seems pretty secure. I must have got this out and played with it before because it's telling me to unscrew things that are already unscrewed. So place the round flat end of the attachment against the blade. Okay, so I think we're getting to the point now where we're going to start making it up. That definitely goes in there. Okay, yeah. So then that goes on there. Which way round, I wonder? You're not going to tell me, are you? Because it's supposed to be all put together. I must have had a play with it and then washed it and put it all back in little tiny pieces. So if we're turning that way, which we are, then it must go that way. Okay, yeah, I think I'm getting this. So we're going to put the small attachment on, the small piece, rightly or wrongly. And then this holds everything in place. There we go. Yes, it's all starting to become clear now. There we go. And then this goes on here. And then finally this bit screws it on. There we go. Now, everything I've read, which is not as much as it could be, tells me that about 35% fat is right. I've done it by eye. I think I'm about there. We'll see. I might be a bit on the lean side, but as a rule, my family prefers a leaner meat. And then the only other thing we've got to do is just add a little bit of seasoning. So we're going to put it in a container big enough for us to move it around a little bit. There you go, all that. Fingers crossed, it's going to be sausage meat. And I think this silicone cake tray is going to be the best for catching the sausage meat. So lastly, we're just going to put our seasoning in. Now, here we've got salt, sugar, pepper and garlic. And it is, I can't give you amounts, but it's probably about a tablespoon of pepper, a tablespoon of sugar, a tablespoon of salt, and 2 tablespoons of garlic. The garlic's just chopped garlic that we had from the garlic that we harvested in the spring, and I preserve that in white wine vinegar, which is really easy to do. There's several ways of preserving garlic. Obviously you can dry it. We also like to preserve some in honey, basically ferment it. But we're going to turn this around now. And if this works, this is the last stage really of things I've never tried before until we get to this prosciutto. So if this works, I'm going to be an incredibly happy little bear. Now I'm being careful obviously not to push my fingers in too far, although I'm nowhere near a blade. Oh my goodness, look at that. Wow. Who'd have thunk it? I'm so happy. I can't believe how well this is going. For some reason, I had it in my head that there was going to be some problem I was going to hit upon during this process, but I needn't have been concerned. I think I might actually just swap blades for a wider disc, because I think that might make my life a little bit quicker. Let's go with the biggest one. Yeah, that's going to be much quicker. So we're nearly at the end now. We've got 3 nice big bags of sausage meat now. I'm thrilled. I'm so happy. I mean, this is from someone who just 4 days ago had never ever ever slaughtered a pig, never ever ever butchered a pig, never ever ever made sausage meat, never ever ever jointed out the cuts. I've now done all of those things, and I've got all of those amazing pieces of meat in the freezer, and I've got belly pork in the fridge currently turning into streaky bacon. I've got sausage meat happening right in front of my eyes. Last tiny little bit to do now. I've got hams turning into hams in the fridge. I'm so thrilled, honestly. And every single step of it, there's been challenges, there's been things that haven't gone exactly as you'd dream if you could close your eyes and click your fingers. And that's okay, and from all of those, I've learned how to do it better next time. So, you know, there's so much about the slaughtering I'll do better next time. Just being prepared, having the equipment you want at the right time. Setting this up, I mean, this is all gunked up. I'm getting as much sausage meat out of this end as I am this end. But, you know, I've worked out how this machine works now, and I'm happy with it. So this is the last of our sausage meat. We're going to bag that up, and just look. There's got to be 2 pounds of sausage meat there, 1 kilogram of sausage meat at least. And I feel a huge sense of accomplishment. And this is the last of it. This is the last bit I have to do, apart from a bit of clearing up, which my wife will tell me is the most important piece, and she'll be right. I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude for the animal, and gratitude for the experience, and filled with a sense of accomplishment. So I'm super happy. And the most important takeaway from this, in my opinion, is that there's nothing I've done that you can't do. Nothing. It's easy. It's not easy, but it's easy to try, and it's easy to fail, which is what I've done. I've tried and I've failed at each part of it. But my failure has earned me the prize anyway. You know, the failure's been a means to an end, and the end hasn't been perfect. I don't have my cuts labelled all perfectly like I would from a butcher. I've probably lost, not very much, but I've probably lost 3 or 4 pounds of meat through not being able to trim the carcass well enough. All these things are the price of the lesson that I've just had, and it's a price I am willingly happy to pay. So there we go, we're all wrapped up. I've got a freezer full of pork, I've got a fridge full of pork, and yeah, you're leaving me today a very happy man. And you know, like I say, the takeaway is there's nothing here you can't do. So you don't have to start by growing your own pig and slaughtering it yourself, but perhaps you want to speak to a butcher and get a bigger joint of meat than you might otherwise. It'd be a bit cheaper, and you can joint it out yourself and do your own bits and bobs from there. Perhaps you want to have a go at tackling your own turkey next year, or your own chicken, or even a squirrel, or whatever it is. You might not want to, that's fine. But don't think you can't, because you can, because I did. And you know, I had no more experience just 4 days ago than any of you guys, none at all. And yeah, you can tell I can't stop smiling, because I just did the sense of accomplishment. I'm really happy. So I'm gonna get this in one of these in the fridge, 2 of these, 3 of these in the freezer, have a good clean down, and then I'm going to be making my
leftover tagliatelle carbonara for tea. So if you find these videos valuable, there's several ways you can support them, and the most important of which is to subscribe to our channel and press that bell so that you get notified when I release a new video. Please make sure you like this video if you've liked it. I don't want sympathy likes, but if you've watched this far into it, I'm guessing you've liked it. So please do press that button. Leave me a comment down below. What do you think? Are you going to have a go at something like this? What did I do wrong that I haven't mentioned? Is there something I did wrong that you saw that I could do better next time? Because I'd love to learn. Please do let me know. And if you want to support me more directly, then follow the link in the description to my Patreon. Patreon.com/Self-Sufficient Hub, and you can become a patron of Self-Sufficient Hub. However you choose to support me, I genuinely appreciate it, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.